To me, they're places that I know I can coast through, ride at whatever pace I want to ride at, and feel a little safer than a given average street here. The neighborhood greenways are roads in Portland that are designed to be quieter and slower. The number one most obvious thing you see is that the speed limit is 20. And in some areas there's the yellow signs that say, go 15, this is a shared road. And people don't always listen to the speed limits, but what you see with a lot of these streets is the way they're set up, you just can't go very fast in a car. There's a lot of blind corners and areas where you need to be slow enough to really be able to look for pedestrians, cyclists, and other people using that road. And they're also not the fastest way to get to where you want to go if you're in a car in the first place. So that makes it a really pleasant experience for cyclists. Cyclists are often encouraged to use the entire lane in these greenways, so you don't need to feel like you're in a bike lane, what my friend calls bike gutter. Essentially, you're relegated to the side of the road, and even that's in question at times. That's not the case on a greenway. You very much get the feeling of maybe you're not even in a goal to get somewhere. There's no destination in mind. That's okay. You're valid, and you get to use the space the way you want to. You get to ride side by side with your friends, and maybe occasionally you might get to the side for a car to pass. But it's that feeling of you're allowed and you're valid to take space that for so long we've deemed only reasonable for cars to have. I think the first time I really explored and experienced greenways was, I'm from Hillsborough, which is 20 miles west of here. So my entire upbringing had been very suburban, and my cycling experiences have been very suburban. And I moved to Portland on the 1st of April, just a few months ago. And when I was touring my apartment, I made sure after I toured my apartment to do a 10-mile loop through the inner east side of the city and really kind of hit all the popular spots that I want to go to on the regular, like parks, and I see how it feels to bike around this area. And Google Maps had me on the greenways most of the time. So my first experience on the greenways was just it was magical, because for the first time I didn't feel so stressed out with the low speed limits. The cars that are on these greenways aren't really looking to travel far distances quickly. They're just, maybe they have houses there, they're stopping there for a reason, but it made it much more pleasant for cycling there. And I think the second part with that was seeing so many other cyclists also using these roads, because back in Hillsborough, I would be the only cyclist I would see for multiple days of cycling. And here, I just go on one ride and I see dozens of cyclists, and you feel a little more comfort and safety in numbers too. I think the big distinction I see with the greenways is that in Europe, a lot of what they call cycleways are routes where cyclists and pedestrians are prioritized in any interaction. So any intersection that you come up to, the priority is actually on the cyclists and the people walking. Greenways are just not that way. So they are sometimes, but you'll randomly come up to, I just rode past Stark Street a few minutes ago, and it was that exact scenario. You're cruising on the greenway, you're having a great time, and all of a sudden there's a stop sign, and there's fast cars coming through, and your experience is interrupted in a way that's not super pleasant. It's also not as, it really makes cycling not fast enough to compete with cars or compete with even public transit in those scenarios, because you have those interruptions. And if you're also someone who's new to the city or new to cycling in the city and isn't really experienced or used to, where are these greenways, where are these busy streets, it can be kind of, a deterrent for biking, because you're not used to riding this area and you think that you're on a greenway, you think that you're safe, and all of a sudden there's these things you got to worry about, like, oh, I went the wrong way on this street, or oh wow, this street's super busy, I have to stop here, and I didn't know that. So it's definitely a hurdle, I think, for more people that want to ride, and also not feel like they're kind of fighting cars at every intersection. What I would do is gradually go about converting these greenways into streets where those pedestrian and cyclist users are prioritized above all other users. So any interaction, any intersection prioritizes them. And I think starting that closer to the inner city where there's a lot more density, I think, way out on 122nd or 82nd, it doesn't really make as much sense out in East Portland, where cars are still the primary mode of transportation there. But in the inner city here, it can be very easy to get around on a bike, and you can get to pretty much everywhere you want to go if we made that mode of transportation a valued form of transportation. And I think the greenways are a good first step with that, but I think that really shifting them away from cars entirely, and at the minimum prioritizing the cyclists at every step of the way there would be what I would try to push for. I think the most easiest way to implement would be to ban cars from entire sections, and that could be a few blocks here and there, maybe starting out at the more busy areas and then kind of expanding out. Recognizing that there are important arteries that cars, that traffic needs to flow through, but also maybe selectively, enhancing and improving the greenways that aren't in those areas, and in those areas that are, not as bike friendly or not as suited for bike travel. Increasing density of those areas in terms of urban density can make those places better destinations for cyclists, and safer in general if you have fewer cars in those areas, more people walking and biking, and in a more dense area that just makes sense. So you're going to attract those types of users to the area. I do think that there's still a ways to go, and I think that some drivers especially, for them, what they see when they turn onto a greenway, if they're not reading every sign, is another street. And another street is just another space for cars. And so I think that's an important thing that needs to change, is there needs to be a little more awareness, and the culture around greenways needs to grow and become a little more strong. For me, it gives me a lot of purpose and a lot of excitement I care a lot about these issues and these topics. But at the end of the day, I think what unites us all is that we all live in this city, and I think none of us want to get hit by a car or be scared about getting hit by a car. Forget about getting hit by a car, none of us want to breathe in exhaust when we're walking around. And so, in a time when, the economy is not in an amazing place, and, my generation's on harder times than any previous generation has been at this age, it seems like it's just going to do us all a service to not force everyone to own a car just to feel safe and just to get to where they need to go. I just think that also the health benefits that come about from cycling more and walking and just having a quieter space to live are just amazing, and I think anything that brings more of that about is something that I care about. So it's partly that I want to help our community, and I want to join a like-minded group of people that care about that. But part of it's just that I'm just another human in this city that wants to have clean air to breathe and places where I can walk and go and feel safe.